It's strange to think about the fact that Randy Marsh has quickly gone from being one of the most beloved characters in all of South Park to one of the most hated in just a few short years. If you had asked anyone pre-2018 who their favorite South Park characters were, there was a good chance Randy would be at the top. Wait a second, the official South Park social media did this exact thing. Hold up, the South Park Brown, an online poll done to see who the fan favorite character was. They did one in 2015 pitting 64 South Park characters against each other, and by the end of the event it was whittled down to 2. Eric Cartman, naturally, versus Randy Marsh. And who won? Well, Randy. That's right, he was more popular than the series' poster child. However, when they did this exact same event in 2020, by the end of it, this time the two contestants were, well, Eric Cartman and Randy Marsh again. But to be fair, it wasn't even a contest this time around. Eric wiping the floor with Randy, who was still a beloved character really, but it's evident there were now a good few thousand fans who had bumped them out of their #1 spot. How did this happen? When South Park began, Randy was nothing more than a background character. Stan's dead, that was it. But in a few short seasons, he had gone from being incidental to one of the main characters of the series, the amount of episodes revolving around him rapidly increasing, to arguably becoming the main character of South Park. I mean, for Christ's sake, he took over the whole intro for a while. It got to a point where more disgruntled fans began dubbing it the Randy Marsh Show, in an attempt to highlight how far the series had gone astray from where things started, in the hopes that, eventually, the show could return to form and get back to what made people fall in love with South Park to begin with. However, in response to all this, South Park creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker only appeared to double down on their decisions, making it clear that they're aware South Park has changed. They're aware they were giving an ever-increasing amount of focus to a character people were slowly growing sick of. And they didn't care.
Did everyone enjoy the Halloween special?
No, Randy. Only you did.
Oh, well, that was pretty much my target audience anyway.
And so I want to go on a journey today to see how we got here. How did Randy Marsh become the face of South Park? And subsequently, the franchise's most hated character. But first, want to know something people hate even more than Randy Marsh? It's having their personal information get stolen. And that's why I'm glad this video is sponsored by Aura. This video is sponsored by Aura. Did you know over 2.9 billion records were stolen from a national public data breach, including a person's full name, address, phone number, and even social security number? That's important. So I sure am glad I got Aura to help protect myself. See, Aura shows you which data brokers have been selling your info and automatically subs opt-out requests. They'll even get you fast fraud alerts for your bank account or if any other sensitive information has been compromised. Not only does this reduce the amount of spam you get, but also protects you from people who want to use your information to get into personal stuff, again, like your bank account. It's also this perfect all-in-one tool for transaction monitoring, a VPN, antivirus, password manager, parental controls, and way more, all for an affordable price. So stop data brokers from exposing your personal information, and go to aura.com/lsmark for a 2-week free trial, and see how much of yours is getting stolen. Again, that's aura.com/lsmark, and thanks Aura for sponsoring this video. The goal behind South Park from Matt and Trey's point of view was to portray how kids actually acted in real life. Instead of being pure of heart and the essence of innocence, South Park showcased the kids as being incredibly vulgar, constantly swearing and talking about subject matter they had no need to be aware of, never mind discussing. However, this was always grounded within a certain level of naivety. Sure, the kids would say every dirty word under the sun, but that doesn't mean they're gonna know what they mean.
Don't call my brother a dildo! What's a dildo? Well, I don't know. And I'll bet Cartman doesn't know either. I know what it means!
When attempting to get the show picked up, however, the two have talked about the troubles they faced in trying to get a studio interested in picking up an adult series starring a group of children, worrying that grown-ups wouldn't be eager to spend their night watching a show about 4 8-year-olds. In response to this, they had made it clear that with this setup, they were put in a position which allowed them to focus on each of the boys' families too. Whereas a show like The Simpsons is generally restricted to only tell stories revolving around one of these 5 characters, South Park's core cast could be as big as 15 when taking into account each of their parents, siblings, grandparents, and then each of them can have their own lives and jobs and friends, and you get it, right? The storytelling possibilities here are way more open than your average sitcom. It's why I think calling the show South Park was brilliant. From the very beginning, not restricting themselves to just telling stories about the boys. On top of them, the draw of the show is the town and its wacky inhabitants, and all the crazy shit that happens there. I mean, hell, the intro has nothing to do with the characters. It's them singing about the town and the people who live there, as we get a glimpse at all the characters in the background. It's also why I think it was so easy for Matt and Trey to eventually get so carried away and tossing the boys to the wayside. I mean, to be fair, it's not like that happened so soon into the series or anything. Despite having the opportunity to do so, the show rarely took attention away from Stan, Kyle, Eric, and Kenny. And when they did decide to have the occasional diversion, it was typically met with unanimous backlash from fans. Such as Season 4's Pip, which is all about Pip, which is commonly considered the worst fucking episode of the entire show. They would eventually grow more comfortable with attempting to expand their scope of South Park, and would take more permanent risks. Such as in Season 5 when they committed to killing off Kenny for a full year, so they could explore the lives of some of the other kids in class, such as Tweak or Butters. Still though, the time they would spend focusing on the parents was still few and far between. Any time one of them took the spotlight, it was usually in a way that directly played off whatever was going on with the kids. Such as when they all start suing each other, which Kyle's lawyer dad Gerald starts to take advantage of. Or when Randy discovers the cause behind their residents spontaneously combusting, and letting the fame go to his head.
You are the best scientific mind South Park has to offer.
A lot of the times, the parents of South Park were treated as a unit. More often than not, their roles were merely of, well, the parents. They were written from the kids' POV as obstacles. The threat in a lot of these early episodes was simply the fear of being grounded, like when they were banned from watching Terrence and Phillip, or when Stan sneaks off on a trip to Cartman's grandparents' house. And really, Randy was as bland as they come, constantly speaking with a super monotone voice, and the jokes revolving around Tim typically being his nonchalant attitude towards whatever crazy situation the other characters were in.
Yes, hon. I had to restrain him so we wouldn't find the bodies in the backyard and take our baby away.
Why'd you take his pants off?
You tend to get the idea that in these early episodes, Randy was written through the perspective of Trey Parker attempting to put himself in the shoes of his own dad, shown mostly through him admitting the voice of the character is nothing more than an impression of his own father.
When I first started doing the show, I was doing an impersonation of my dad. Now that I'm way older, I'm just doing my voice. You know what I mean?
South Park kind of sucks now. You guys want to bail?
Despite Randy remaining fairly consistent throughout the first couple seasons of South Park, over time his more nonchalant attitude began to disappear. The show in general was getting increasingly more outrageous, the town frequently getting into insane frenzies about whatever topic of the week they were covering. And a lot of the time they ended up relying on Randy to be the central speaker in these situations.
Be Sonic Kute, Ta Sabara.
Oh God, our parents are so stupid, dude.
Like when they're so afraid of their children getting kidnapped that they send them off to live by themselves, or when he and the other parents tried to get gay people banned from scouts.
You do not say big silly goose. You call him an asshole like a normal kid.
But Dad, I was just trying to...
Stanley, you call your friend an asshole this instant.
Eventually, this is built up so much that when the desire to focus more on the parents came around, it was only natural that Randy would be their first choice. Obviously, a character like Cartman is the most popular, or Kenny is most merchandisable. But despite all of that, I would definitely call Stan the mean of the four boys. He's got the most average life and personality. If you want to focus on one of the boys' dads, he's the natural pick. Kenny's is poor, Cartman doesn't have one, Kyle's, is bald. They liked Randy, that's what I'm getting at. There was a want on Matt and Trey's part to do more with a dad character, and Randy was the one who had gotten the most attention over the course of the show so far, so no shit they're picking him. I'm sure their approach when it came to writing also affected that. Matt and Trey have made it pretty clear that Stan and Kyle represent them respectively, their families being loosely based off their own. That's right, Trey actually has a dad named Randy. And if you were ever wondering why Trey gets solo writing credits for the majority of South Park episodes, well, it's because even though he and Matt come up with the story ideas themselves and map out the episodes with each other, Trey is the one who primarily writes the final script by the end. And so if I were to guess, that could possibly give an answer as to why Randy was given the most attention compared to the other adults. Pull from what you know. Another factor which further contributed to Randy's ever-growing screen presence simply came from the fact that Trey was getting older. South Park had come out when he was only 27, and by the time Season 9 was rolling around, he was turning 36. While they still clearly had that edgy, juvenile sense of humor that made South Park stand out when it first premiered, they had since then shown interest in exploring more adult topics as time went on, tackling ideas that just wouldn't be possible with a group of kids. The first major case of this we saw with Randy came in Season 9's The Losing Edge. While the ass story revolved around the boys' continuous attempts to throw their baseball games in the hopes of getting booted out and finally getting to enjoy their summer, Randy spans each of these games challenging the loudest, most obnoxious dads to drunken fights in the bleachers. It was by far the furthest they had ever pushed Randy, giving him, and only him, something to prove. And unlike other episodes where his mission would be to save the town from some world-ending disaster, this time around it was a battle that only really mattered to him, which only added to the absurdity of it all. Also helps that this storyline spawned one of the most quoted South Park memes to date.
I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America?
And with that, the day Randy Marsh was reborn. The episode immediately skyrocketed Randy into becoming one of South Park's most beloved characters, which I'm positive only encouraged Matt and Trey to use him more. Now, anytime they want to tackle a subject that wouldn't make sense for the kids to face, Randy became the immediate go-to. It didn't even take very long for this to take effect. Randy having another prominent episode towards the end of the season which drew attention to his alcohol abuse. Again, not really something they could tackle with Stan. Oh wait. Still though, I think they managed to strike a good balance throughout the following seasons. It never felt like Randy was taking any attention away from the boys. At most he would have 2 or 3 episodes in a season where he took the spotlight. He typically took the role of the show's B-story character around this time. Usually the formula would see Randy be introduced to whatever subject the boys were obsessed with that week, and try to get into it for himself, such as World of Warcraft or Guitar Hero. As the show went on for hundreds of episodes, the ideas tended to come more so from Matt and Trey reacting to whatever new trend was going on at the time. And what better way to react to this stuff than through an old man desperately trying to understand what was hip with the kids these days? Something a lot harder to accomplish with the boys, even if they did pull it off occasionally.
This is cool. We are really getting old, you guys.
And even then, when Randy did take over, they always did a good job at balancing things with the boys handling the B-story, such as when he becomes obsessed with being a celebrity chef or when he not so accidentally drops an N-bomb on Wheel of Fortune, both of which feature a B-story where we see how the boys are reacting to this. This era of South Park will always be special to me, as it's actually the era in which I was introduced to the show. As a matter of fact, the very first episode of South Park I ever watched starred Randy. Just my luck that while my dad was flicking through TV channels one night, he just so happened to stop on one of the most memorable episodes of the entire series, an episode which also served as an excellent piece of foreshadowing as to what Randy was going to become, even if unintentionally. Season 14's medicinal fried chicken saw Randy desperately trying to get weed from a new store in town. However, in order to get a doctor's note for it, he decides he's going to give himself testicular cancer.
Oh, hey, Stan, could you grab me a beer?
Obviously, the gag here is just how far Randy was willing to go to get some weed, but after the episode was over, it was dropped to move on to the next thing. But if only people knew back then just how much marijuana would go on to define his entire personality in the future. To be quite honest, I never really minded the increased focus on Randy here, and it's clear a lot of other people didn't either. He was a good character and had quickly become a fan favorite. It's made pretty clear that around this time, Matt and Trey were paying close attention to what people responded positively to in South Park. They introduced Timmy in Season 4, who was originally only meant to appear in a single episode. However, he became so popular that even the network was begging them to put him in more of the show.
And then Timmy just exploded, and it's like, we got to make Timmy t-shirts and Timmy doll. You know, the network's telling us, you know, like, we love Timmy. You're going to do more Timmy? And we're like, all right, we'll do more Timmy. And
they then became more interested in exploring a character like Butters, and so gave him his very own episode in Season 5, which was also extremely popular. Now Butters could be considered a 5th member of the main group. It's kind of weird to go back to a point in the show when he wasn't always there. Season 6 saw the boys be introduced to a new kid, Jimmy, who was also so well received that they just dropped him into South Park Elementary with the rest of them from then on. I'm pretty sure that episode at least implied he didn't go to the same school as everyone else, but they clearly felt he was too good of a character to only use once. And really, Randy was no different, just another resident they took a chance on that paid off. Now they have a character who could reflect an entirely different side of Matt and Trey, the side that was getting older, the side that now had kids of their own. Now they could do stories about their confusion around how safe they felt sports was getting or Minecraft, while still ensuring the boys felt like boys and not mouthpieces for whatever they wanted to make fun of that week. It got to a point where episodes, which in concept you think would be perfect for the boys to react to, were instead being given to Randy. Like Overlogging, which saw all internet in America go out. With a setup like that, you'd imagine it would be prime for a story about somebody like Cartman going crazy, trying to figure out a way to get it back in some wacky adventure that would take them to space, or the government was behind it all, I don't know. Those are always the 2 plot tropes they end up falling back on. But either way, you know, no! Instead, the episode is all about how Randy's reacting to this, not being able to access all his internet. The only mean kid in this episode is Stan, and even then, he's just kind of sitting around. Their preference for Randy was becoming way more apparent. But around this time, nobody really cared since the episodes were still great, and this formula continued for a good 6 or so seasons. Honestly, that entire period of South Park, from Season 9 to Season 15, all blends together in my mind. It was an incredibly consistent string of quality stuff. Things were about to change, though, as Season 15 would bring in a pair of episodes where South Park got as self-reflective as it's ever been. This week, instead of giving their take on pop culture, Matt and Trey were going to give their take on the state of their own show. Kinda. See, you're getting old and Asperger's are probably as close South Park has ever gotten to acknowledging in-universe how long they've been on the air. The only other examples I can think of are Cancelled and Raising the Bar.
Or did the bar get lowered way before that? And then I started thinking, maybe it was us.
The episode sees Stan turn 10 as he begins to notice that everything he used to enjoy is starting to seem more shitty to him. This whole storyline is more of a commentary on growing up and how easy it is to fall into cynicism. But what I want to focus on instead is what's going on with Randy during all this. Once again, we see a plot in which Randy is trying to act more hip, starting a band for a genre of music he doesn't even understand. Which then just gets on Sharon's nerves, typical Randy story. Eventually this builds, however, and by the end of the episode, instead of everything resetting as Randy moves on to the next silly fad, they don't push past it, and as a matter of fact, finally address just how insane his character has gotten in recent times.
First, you're obsessed with baseball fights. Then you need to play Warcraft. Then you gotta be a celebrity chef.
Why can't you ever just support me?
The past entire 6 seasons of Randy have now been recontextualized as some sort of midlife crisis. Him finally admitting how deeply unhappy he is, and that's why he's been attempting to find some kind of fulfillment through these other avenues.
It's kind of the same story in a different way, but it just keeps getting more and more ridiculous.
The episode caused massive speculation about the future of South Park. There was genuine fear amongst fans that the show would be nearing its end. Matt and Trey once and for all vocalizing that they're done with South Park. Of course, we all know that's not what ended up happening. In fact, they quickly admitted that they put no real thought or deeper meaning into the thing and it was purely accidental.
This is cool, and I don't really know what, you know what I mean? We didn't really think too much about, what it was saying on a bigger level. It just felt really satisfying, like a real end to, real good emotional end to the show.
Yeah.
But despite that, I believe the episode still does a great job at culminating Randy's arc, finally giving an explanation for why he's been getting more and more extreme as each season passes. Instead, focusing the entirety of the following season around Stan trying to get his parents back together. But one thing that seemed to come in the way of that is their desire to just do more with Randy. I've listened to the South Park episode commentaries a handful of times. Isn't hard to do as they spend at most 5 minutes talking about each of them. But when getting to that season 15 mark, it becomes clear that the two were growing more interested in taking advantage of the ever-evolving television landscape. When South Park began, it was the norm to have each episode remain its own self-contained thing. There's no knowing what episode will be somebody's first, and so it's expected to keep things episodic. But with the advent of shows adopting a more serialized structure, along with streaming services starting their rise, it seemed that Matt and Trey eventually decided they were ready to take that leap with South Park. They weren't tired of the show. All they simply wanted to do was try something new. Over time, they had leaned more and more into serialized elements, Season 18 beginning by carrying over plot points from previous episodes in an attempt to spin off into some new problem for the characters. And with this, they had unintentionally sparked one of Randy's most iconic arcs yet.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I am Lord, yeah, yeah, yeah. Lord, Lord, come in, Lord, yeah, 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 yeah.
What initially started as a one-time and gag, an early joke in the episode teasing that Randy somehow knew the singer Lord, only to simply don her attire himself after being caught out on a lie. Matt and Trey saw a few media outlets confuse this twist as them claiming Randy Marsh was Lord, literally. And so, they ran with it. The entire rest of the season revolving around Randy trying to deal with this double life, and the pressures that come with trying to keep a clean image in today's society. And a storyline so iconic that it even resulted in Lord herself acknowledging it.
Yeah, 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 I'm Lord. Yeah, 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 yeah.
In fact, she even retweeted that fun little video clip.
The success of their serialization light, as they come to call it, came to a head with South Park's landmark 20th season in 2016, where they attempted to turn things up to 11, having the entire season revolve around one continuous storyline the whole way through. Randy barely has anything to do with it, so I'll skip to the conclusion. Big disaster. They had based a majority of the story around the upcoming election, planning it all around the success of one specific candidate. They were very wrong. Either way, that's not important, as 2016 also marked an incredibly significant year for America. Not only was it the 20th anniversary of South Park, but also the year that weed became legalized in California. With the previous season being considered a monumental low point for South Park, Matt and Trey aimed to get things back to basics the following year. But that all changed with the release of Season 22, which saw the most drastic change yet to the series' status quo. Randy became a weed farmer. Now, this is not meant fully as a negative, and it really is not as severe as once considered, but if there were any moment in South Park history that I would consider jumping the shark, it would be the premiere of Tegridy Farms. The idea sounds simple enough, Randy quits his job as a geologist, a trait which had barely any focus put on it throughout the show's run, and in its place he decides to grow and sell marijuana, buying a farm just outside town. Alright, not a bad idea. Every one of these cartoons eventually does the family moves to a farmhouse storylines. It was just South Park's turn, I guess. What do you mean permanent? That's right! From this point on, Stan and his okay, well, more accurately, Randy and his family were living on a marijuana farm. A Tegridy farm. You get the idea that Matt and Trey just find this concept really, really funny. At first, I didn't really mind this idea. I personally wasn't the biggest fan of Season 21, and so I was eager to see what they would do with some of the newer ideas introduced in 22, like Tegridy Farms. Some fans were a little perplexed, though. Seemed a bit strange to make such a jarring shift in setting for one of the show's main characters, while never really focusing on how Stan felt about all this beyond being pissed off. And still, I don't think their reaction to this change would have been nearly as strong as it ended up being if they chose to ease into it. Instead, the rest of the season played out like normal, Tegridy Farms taking up little to no focus in retrospect. But if anything, that factor only made things more strange when Season 23 began and, well, it was no longer South Park. The intro's gone. This right here, what you're watching, is Tegridy Farms. Every A story revolved around Randy trying to keep his weed business afloat through different schemes, and plots that were growing ever so repetitive. I think what I hated most about these episodes is that they never gave us a solid idea of how the business was actually doing. Every episode seemingly starting or ending with Randy making a bunch of seals and becoming the biggest weed dealer in town, and then the next one would start and suddenly he's back at square one. This would be fine if it were spaced out a bit with other episodes about the boys, who were also getting littler and littler screen time aside from Eric and Butters occasionally. But the first 6 episodes of Season 23 were almost seldom about Randy. And what sucks most about this is that I think it could have been genius. While I was watching each premiere, every week desperately waiting for the regular intro to return, signifying that Tegridy Farms would be over, I started to see what they were doing here. Matt and Trey knew they were pissing people off. The entirety of Season 23 almost reveled in the fact that people were fed up with this gag, to the point where their season finale entirely focuses on the residents of South Park getting so pissed off at the constant weed shenanigans that they just throw them in prison.
Go where? Everyone's had enough, Mr. Marsh. We need you to come with us. What do you think? My show! My Tegridy Farm show!
Everyone's had enough of Tegridy Farms.
You people are just jealous! Jealous that I took over South Park and I'm successful!
It's funny because the episode does decide to have Randy reflect on the person he's become, and how over-reliant his character has gotten on weed before considering changing his ways. If they could pull this off, it could recontextualize the past 6 episodes in a way that actually makes it kind of funny looking back, like a smaller scale you're getting old moment. Anyways, the president comes in, tries to get him back on weed for some reason, I don't know why he cares, and then Randy is exonerated at the last minute and goes back to his farm to talk to a literal camera about how good the past batch of episodes have been. To be fair, Randy almost entirely disappeared for the rest of the season, the next 3 episodes attempting to experiment more with other less focused on members of the town to, mixed results. And so the end of the season rolled around. And with no further ideas, Matt and Trey once again returned to their all-reliable.
South Park needs you.
Guys, my season is over.
I can't imagine it was intentional, but it almost comes off like Matt and Trey saying, "We get it, we know you're sick of Tegridy Farms. We know you think South Park has gotten so far removed from where it started. But hey, here you are watching it, you clearly still need it in some form." Fans were not happy. If anything, I would consider Season 23 as being South Park's absolute low point. Sure, there were a group out there who liked the Tegridy Farm stuff, but I think it's safe to say most people out there were growing sick of this gag that had somehow spanned 2 entire seasons of the show. And because they refused to have things reset by the end of the season, it became more clear than ever. Tegridy Farms was here to stay. And the state of South Park after Season 23 certainly didn't help all this. I believe fans getting even more tired of Randy was a mix of this, their willingness to do light serialization and therefore being comfortable with sticking to Tegridy, along with the recent deal they had made with Paramount Plus to create 14 new South Park movies, 2 a year. I have talked about this deal extensively and how many problems it's caused for South Park, so there's no need to reiterate it. But all that's important to know for this discussion is, regular South Park seasons were getting cut by around 45 minutes each, with that time being allotted to their movies. Basically, for every 6 South Park episodes that air, you get a movie along with it, on a different streaming service. And eventually, the regular episodes stopped airing altogether. Because of these major shakeups, along with these movies obviously needing to focus on COVID given it would be kinda hard to ignore, there was no real room to try and get Randy back to basics. All they could really do was continue doing the same thing. I mean, not that they cared, again, they seemed to really like this gag. You know, for as uninteresting as I believe season 21 and 22 of South Park to be, Tegridy really did appear to rejuvenate a lot of their interest in the show. From here, though, the series got a slight return to form. Season 25 barely had any focus on Tegridy, and Randy even briefly appeared in his old outfit for an episode. Still not sure why. But with the release of their next special, The Streaming Wars, we once again saw Tegridy take the wheel, in an odd repeat of season 23 because the special ends with some massive geological disaster that could potentially wipe out the town. And so despite spending a majority of the second half being some unfunny Karen parody, Randy is called to once again adopt his previous role in a fashion extremely similar to his very first appearance in the show, and save the town from the brink of destruction, paired with a not-so-subtle song about how nice it is to have him back.
It's like you just became a one-note override part of the show.
Still a weed farmer, though. I have no idea why they didn't use this as the perfect opportunity to reset his character, have the Marsh family move back into their old house, but it's like I said, they just really like Tegridy Farms. I will say, though, from this point on, there's definitely been more of an effort to divert Randy's stories away from Tegridy Farms in recent times. Sure, they still live there and he's always donning his farmer attire, but now we'll have episodes about him getting obsessed with Japanese toilets, or becoming an OnlyFans model, or getting on Ozempic. Said they were moving away from the farm stuff, not that it was all good. But really, it's kinda hard to see where Randy's character will go from here, which aspect they'll go on to lean into. We recently saw Eric's family move back from the hot dog into their normal house again. That's a whole other story right there, but clearly they're willing to go back on seemingly permanent changes. Either way, it's difficult to tell because South Park's kind of in limbo right now, being almost completely missing for around a year. But when it does eventually return, I'm gonna be interested in seeing what they continue to do with Randy. I certainly don't think he's become a bad character by any means. He's still great to follow along with, but, you know, too much of a good thing isn't always good.